What's up, guys, and welcome to a very special episode of Two Car Garage. We are taking a break from our Yamaha Virago build. We are not restoring something. We're not fixing something up to sell it. We're doing a flash build. This is what I call a refresh and ride. So what we're going to do is refresh a motorcycle. Here is a 2006 Honda 919, also called the Hornet or CB900, and this is my bike. I bought it for myself. I bought it to be a commuter. Now, the reason that everybody loves this motorcycle is because it has everything you want in a bike and nothing you don't. It has everything a motorcycle needs and nothing it doesn't need. It has an inline liquid-cooled four-cylinder that makes over 100 horsepower. It has twin discs in the front and a disc in the back. No anti-lock brakes, no traction control. It has a chain drive with normal sprockets on it. It doesn't have clip-ons or rear sets, just normal handlebars and a relatively comfortable seat. And it has a tach, it has a speedometer. You can even put a windscreen on it, and it just has the standard like 8-inch round headlight or whatever it is. It is just, in its purest sense, a motorcycle. But what sets this apart from all my other motorcycles that I have is it's a 2006. That means it's fuel injected. You can just hop on and ride, and that's what I'm looking for when it comes to a commuter bike. Now, this example has about 20,000 miles on it, which isn't bad at all, and it was really, really well taken care of, and it's in great shape. But the people who owned it before me weren't motorcycle mechanics. So it needs gone through. Not only does it need gone through with all new fluids and sprockets and brake pads and everything like that, but I'm going to make some improvements and modifications to it that will sort of make it better for the purpose I bought it for commuting. I really, really like this like deep candy red color on it. It looks sharp. Again, this is a commuter bike. So one of the selling points to me was this, the stock exhaust pipes. Listen, I have plenty of motorcycles, and I've had motorcycles that will make you go deaf. I've had ones that sound like a Formula One race car. But if I'm just putting a lot of miles on it to work, I want something with just the stock exhaust. Thinking about the order of operations, why don't we start at the front, top, and then just work our way back and down. So if we're starting at the front and the top, that leaves us with the handlebars. So here's the stock handlebars. They're in excellent shape, right? The problem is that they are really, really narrow, like extremely narrow. And they're very, very thin walled. So even though they look nice and they're in great original condition, they have a lot of vibrations going down the road because of the thin walls on them. There's not much weight to them. And they're too narrow for me. It makes it somewhat uncomfortable. We also have these horrible, really thick foam grips. Like, look how thick these grips are. It makes it like I don't have small hands, right? I don't have small hands. But it's just too big. It's not comfortable, and it sort of makes my hand like cramp up almost. So we're going to put on different bars, different grips. And although I like these mirrors, right, because they're sort of like a traditional style, just round chrome mirror, we're going to put on different mirrors too, just to upgrade the looks of it. Also, this windscreen, it's not fitting really well. Sure, it's bolted on, but I don't know if it's the design or just the way it's mounted. It vibrates a lot in the wind, a little bit too much, and I don't really like the look of it, how it's like split down the middle. And then we have turn signals as well. And we are replacing our stock bars with these beautiful gold Renthal bars, which are a little bit higher than the standard ones, which is good for me because I won't have to hunch over quite as much, and they're also much wider than the stock ones too. Now for grips, I've spent a lot of money in the past on grips, and I've bought cheap grips, and honestly I really, really like these just pro grips. They're like $12. I forget, I think they're $6992. I really like this compound. I like the looks of them. They're closed end, so I am going to use some bar end weights just to, again, kill that vibration in the handlebars when I'm commuting a half an hour each way to work. So all you have to do if you have closed ends or just, cut a hole in it, no big deal. The next thing I'm going to do is replace these mirrors. Now, on a lot of my project bikes, I don't use mirrors at all because you can just turn your head. I don't ride them all that much. I don't take them on the highway all that much. But because this is for commuting, I want mirrors, and I want good mirrors. So these are good, right? They're adequate. They're this old style chrome round, which is nice. But I wanted something that sort of went with the rest of the bike a little bit better. So I opted for this style mirror. And I forget which, like, Aprilia or something these are like reproductions of. But either way, they're just a nice modern style mirror that will make the bike look great. Now we're going to shift our focus to the front here with the headlight and these turn signals. We're going to replace these front turn signals with these nice, more modern LED stalks. These will match these mirrors really, really well. And then we're also going to replace the standard H4. Next, moving to the back of the bike, I want to tackle this tail section. So I do have an integrated LED tail light to install. So it'll have the turn signals right in it. So that'll take a little bit of wiring. And then I want to make my own tail tidy or fender eliminator, whatever you want to call it. So I'm probably just going to remove this entire rear fender, see what sort of bracketry I can make up there just to mount the plate. Or worst case scenario, I'll just trim the rear fender off. So, all right, let's get to work. Okay, so this is bent at the right angle where you can still see it if you're driving behind, but it is kicked up a little bit. Then I just made out of, like, I don't know, what is this, 16th or something inch steel, a little backer for the license plate. That way it just adds some rigidity to it so it doesn't flex quite as much. And then it'll just bolt right in. And then you put a nut from the bottom, bingo, bango. And the best thing is that this was like a couple dollars, right? When you factor in the bolts that I already had and the little steel. There you go. Let's move on. So because this bike is for commuting, I seriously thought about adding big engine guards, right? Like big steel tubular engine guards covering the whole thing, but I just didn't really like the looks of it. And I mean, you're fooling yourself if you're saying motorcycling isn't about looks. So I went for, I'd say, a little bit less protection, but still plenty of protection where you can just pick the bike up and go and you're not going to damage a whole lot. And that is T-Rex frame sliders that will replace the stock frame sliders which attach to the engine case for some reason, and then also these T-Rex Racing engine cover guards. So they mount on the engine covers, so that way if you dump it, this gets scratched and not the engine. Let's install them. Some sprockets here, and I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, all right, you're building this thing for highway commuting, I'm sure you went up in the front or down in the back sprocket. That way you help out your top end. But I'm still a kid at heart, so I'm just replacing the rear sprocket with the stock number of teeth, but the front I am going down one tooth. So this thing, even though it's already a 919 and can haul, it's gonna bring that front end up really, really easily now. And it won't affect my top end too much. I mean, I'm driving through traffic on the highway. I don't want to go 140 miles an hour every single day, all day. Now, while I have the back wheel off, I'm going to replace the brakes as well on it. And then I'm also going to put stainless steel brake lines on. We are done with our sprockets and brake line kit. There's our Vortex front sprocket with one less tooth. We go to our Vortex rear sprocket. Everything's nice and shiny. The chain's adjusted to the proper slack. Over on this side, we see some fresh meats there and our nice like gray tinted, I guess, stainless brake line. You know what every mechanic's nightmare is? Vacuum lines. Vacuum lines everywhere. So this is a simple bike, and that's one of the reasons why I love it. But then when you lift the tank, you just see the mayhem of vacuum lines everywhere. So here's the plan. We're gonna do routine maintenance on it. We're gonna replace the spark plugs in here. We already did the air filter where we needed to lift the tank anyway because we're gonna drain and refill the coolant. However, we're also going to simplify this madness. These are the pair valves right here. So they let crankcase air back out to recirculate. We are going to, well, not recirculate, it takes crankcase air and puts it into the intake. We are going to block these off, so we have block off plates. We're going to remove all those vacuum lines, the solenoid that's up in here with those. On our intake, there's a little flapper on the inside that opens and closes based on the RPM. That doesn't do anything good for your bike. So we're going to eliminate that and its associated vacuum lines and solenoid or whatever. So spark plugs, coolant change, eliminate a bunch of vacuum lines. I'll show you how much we pull after we're finished. All right, we're done pulling all the crap, and look at all this stuff we were able to pull out of there. We have our flapper valve intake solenoid and wires. We have our pair valve crankcase recirculation stuff here. This is just so much complication. And one of the biggest draws of this bike is its simplicity, right? So eliminating stuff that adds to the complexity and the mess, it's harder to work on. I call this good.
No, God! No, God, please, no! No!
I'm about to dive in.
Now that the spark plugs are done, we changed the oil, we changed the coolant. The only thing left to do is the front end here. We're going to pull the front wheel, pull the forks, drain and refill the fork oil, and then also replace the front brake pads and put on stainless steel brake lines. And then we'll be done. Let's do it. Now that our 919 is all buttoned up, there's only one thing left to do, and that's wheel it outside, give you guys the grand tour over everything, see all the work that we did, and then take it for a ride. Let's check out all the modifications that we did, starting at the top here. Between these Renthal handlebars that are a little bit higher and a little bit wider, the new grips, the bar end weights, the nice Vortex standard length levers, this thing is a joy to hold on to. You don't get any vibrations. It's sort of the perfect seating position with your arms spread a nice amount. It feels great. We put our upgraded mirrors on. These things are big enough so that you can actually see, but small enough so that they look pretty darn good too. We have our LED turn signals on the front. We have our T-Rex Racing frame sliders here. Remember, the stock sliders were attached to the engine cases, so instead we put the stock bolts on and then put on real frame sliders. We also put on these case sliders, one on that side, here on that side. As you can see, the previous owner should have had them on before too. Then we put on some stainless steel brake lines and new brake pads on the front and the rear. We have stainless line on the back as well. That sort of smoked gray looks pretty nice, I think. So new pads, new lines, new brake fluid, of course, new coolant, new motor oil with a high flow Filtro filter, new high flow Filtro air filter as well, because remember we took that crappy K&N filter out of it. We also replaced the spark plugs. We also put our LED headlight in too, so this thing will light up the highway like Christmas when we're commuting to and from work in the dark. We removed all of the vacuum hoses and solenoids that we didn't need, right? That flapper inside the intake, as well as those pair valves on top of the engine there. We removed those valves and the solenoid from that. On the back, we did our own little tail tidy here, and that looks fantastic with an integrated tail light that has turn signals and a flashing brake light on it. We have a relatively new chain, so we kept our chain. We didn't upgrade to a 520, it's just your standard 530 chain, but we did put new Vortex sprockets on it, and we went down one tooth in the front. All right, here we are on the 919, riding it after our mods for the first time. Everybody loves these motorcycles, and I'm starting to see why just from working on it, you know? I mean, it has all of the essential ingredients of what makes a fun motorcycle fun, right? But it doesn't have all of the stuff that makes motorcycles expensive. Now remember, we put on these nice Renthal handlebars, which bring it up a little bit and wider, which is nice. We also lowered the tooth count in the front sprocket by one tooth, which gives us, or should give us, a bunch more off the line. People say that it's got a lot more punch to it. Well, we're going to test that. Right off the bat, when you're riding this through town here, it feels great, right? I mean, I'm on it maybe an eighth of the throttle, and at an eighth throttle, this could have 200 horsepower or it could have 60 horsepower. You don't really care, right? At the amount of throttle that you're using in town here, the horsepower doesn't matter. So whether it's like the new Honda Fireblade with 200 horsepower or this with like 120, it feels great in town. It feels like it has all the power you ever need. Let's get it in the second gear here. Give it a little crack. From what I understand, this isn't like an FZ9 or something where, you know, at every twist of the throttle, it's just bringing the front end up. I think you're going to have to work for it a little bit more on this, even with that front sprocket down. You can really see why so many people like this motorcycle, though. It just does everything really well. It doesn't do anything great, right? It's not lightning fast. It doesn't handle amazing. It's not perfectly comfortable. It's not really good at touring. It's not really good off-road, right? It doesn't do everything great, but it does most things well. I mean, here's a 2006 with 20,000 miles on it that I bought for just over $3,000. $3,300. What the heck else are you going to get for $3,300 that on the back roads you can downshift and just crank up to 7,500 RPM, dive into the corners like this, and just bring a smile, you know, on your face, but then also hop on the highway, shift into sixth gear, and just cruise at 70 miles an hour comfortably with these nice handlebars all day long. It's hard to get more for your money. I mean, this is a inline-4 Honda, fuel injected, with, you know, 120 horsepower, comfortable seating position. What the heck else are you going to get for $3,300 with all that, right? Liquid cooled, chain drive, fun as heck, looks good. I mean, this bike, even though it's getting up there in age, it still looks modern and it still looks good. If anything, because retro bikes are in right now, people might think it's like a newer model that is just an homage to some of the older bikes with that 8-inch round headlight in the front. You know, I keep thinking to myself, this is what this bike is made for. Like, you know, on these back roads like this, just darting through, this is what the bike is made for. But then everything I do with it, I think to myself, oh, this is what the bike is made for. When I'm on the highway, you know, going as fast as this bike can go, and it's not skipping a beat, you think this is what this bike is made for, right? When you're just haphazardly slinging it around corners without paying too much mind, you know, nowhere near pushing the bike or the tires in this regard to the limits, you think this is what this bike is made for. I think the moral of the story is this bike will do anything you want it to do and do it well. I am really, really happy. All right, we're giving it some speed. Speed limit's 40. We're going about 38 miles an hour here on this road. And even with these stinking dual sport tires, I mean, this thing just feels great. You know, we're humming along at 5,000 RPM, 5.5, almost 6,000 RPM in fourth or fifth gear, going the speed limit, and this bike feels amazing. For $3,000 measly dollars, this thing feels fantastic. Sweeping left turn over this hill. Let's get some weight down on the front end. Upshift. Going into construction here maybe. Let's bring her back down to 35 miles an hour. That is why you ride a motorcycle. There's no traction control, there's no wheelie control, there's no modes on this thing. It's just pure Honda inline four-cylinder, revving it up, throwing it through the turns, and afterwards you get that rush of adrenaline and you feel good and you're grinning from ear to ear. And this is why you ride motorcycles, right? For that grin, for that little endorphin rush that you get every time you push your comfort just a little bit, right? Part of it, I think, is just you're in this little bubble here. You're in this little envelope where nothing else gets to you. Just you sitting on top of this engine, and you're sort of insulated from the world. Not literally, if you have a helmet and jacket on and stuff, but figuratively too. You can't afford to have your mind wander and think about, your boss or the problems that came up at work or the crying baby at home. You can't afford to do that because you have to stay focused. You're focusing on the cars around you, on the engine humming below you. You're focused on the machine that you're one with. And isn't that what the definition of meditation is? Focusing on one thing, clearing your mind of everything else except that one thing. It could be anything, but that is meditation. And perhaps people love motorcycling so much because of that meditative nature to it. Now, it is exhausting. Sure, it's nice sitting in your, heated leather seat cage and just listening to podcasts on your way to work. It's comfortable. But I have to often remind myself, humans aren't meant to be constantly comfortable. We're not meant to be constantly getting our butts heated up on leather while we listen to, historical podcasts about the Spanish conquest of Mexico. So much of our life is comfortable to force yourself to be uncomfortable, even if it's just on your way to and from work every once in a while, I think is good for your spirit. So there's our finished product, guys. This bike is a blast to ride. It is so much fun, and like I said 100 times now, I don't think you can get this much for your money in any other motorcycle. It's going to be a joy to ride to work every day. I'm looking forward to putting on some miles on it. It's already got 20,000 miles. Maybe I'll check back, give you guys an update with how many miles we put on it in 6 months, a year, and how it's holding up. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching another episode of Two Car Garage. Please hit the subscribe button if you didn't already to keep seeing more awesome videos. We'll see you next time. Thanks.